All right, let's go. Let's subtract some fractions now. Let's subtract. Let's only do 2 subtraction problems and move to the multiplication. All right, here we go. Let's take a look. All right, so now what we have is I'm going to subtract the same numbers that I was working with before. Let's subtract the same. Let's subtract 3.14 and let's subtract 2. Let's subtract 2. All right, so the rules are the same. When you're adding and subtracting, the rules are going to be the same. You still need to line up those decimals. And you still need to rewrite the 2 so it has a decimal. All right, so here we go. We have 3.14 minus 2.0. You must line up the decimals. All right, so you subtract. You get 4. 1 minus 0 is 1. You subtract 3 minus 2 is 1. You bring your decimal down, and that's your final answer. 1.14. It's a final answer. All right. So now we're subtracting. The only difference between adding decimals and subtracting decimals is you're still lining up your decimals. You still have to have decimals in every number. All right. But when you're with the addition problem, obviously you're adding, and with a subtraction problem, you're subtracting. That's the only difference. Here we go. Let's take a look at another problem. All right. So here we go. Let's take a look at 12.48 minus 4.6. 12.48 minus 4.6. All right, so if we're subtracting, let's line up our decimals again. 12.48 minus 4.6. All right, I intentionally put the 4.6 so that this decimal point is directly beneath the other decimal point in the first part of my problem. All right, so here we go. Let's subtract 4.60. So we subtract 8 minus 0 is 8. You can't subtract 4 minus 6. You can't do that. So let's borrow from this 2. Let's make it a 1. Let's bring that 1 over. You get 14 minus 6 is 8. You can't subtract 1 minus 4. Let's borrow from this 1. Let's make that a 0. We'll bring that 1 over, and you get 7. All right, so bring the decimal point down. 7.88 is our final answer. 7.88. Mr. Hendricks, what does this have to do with real life? Mr. Hendricks, what does this have to do with real life? I heard you ask that question. Well, I'll show you what it has to do with real life. I'll show you. Here you go. Let's say you have $12.48. Somebody takes away $14.60. How much do you have? You've got $7.88. All right. So this is important. All right. So we want you to understand. We want you to understand math. We're starting slow. We're starting with, like I said before, we started with fractions earlier than year. Now we're starting with decimals, and we'll move to more complicated, more complex problems later. But for now, we're going to start slow. All right. So let's take a look at one more subtraction problem. Then we'll move to multiplication. Last problem on subtraction. If you have a question on anything, make sure you call in. Here we go. Let's take a look. So now we have 7. Let's take 7 minus 4.009. 7 minus 4.009. Most important thing, line up your decimals. Let's make this 7.000. And we're subtracting 4.009. All right. You cannot. This is like a 10. Okay. So let's subtract 0 minus 9. You can't do it. Let's make this. I'm sorry. 0 minus 9. Sorry about that. You can't do that. So let's borrow from here. Let's make that a 9. All right. So now you can bring that 1 over. You get 1. All right. So now you have, but you really that was really 0. So you got to borrow again from here. And because that was really a 0, you got to borrow again from here. Make that a 6. So you have 9 minus 0 is 9. 9 minus 0 is 9. And then you have 6 minus 4 is 2. All right, so you end up with 2.991. Final answer. 7 minus 4.009 is 2.991. Final answer. What I want to do is, so far what we've done is we've added decimals, we've subtracted decimals, and what I'd like to do now is the last piece in today's unit, which is to multiply decimals. We're going to multiply decimals. All right, let's take a look. I want you to call in, though. Call in with your question. Let's take a look. Multiplication. Multiplication of decimals. All right, so let's multiply 3.14 times 2. 3.14 times 2. When we added and subtracted fractions, the number one thing that we did was we lined up the decimals. We did not attempt the problem until every decimal that was in the problem was lined up. Multiplication is different. Multiplication does not require that you line up your decimals. That's the number one difference between adding, subtracting, and multiplying. So don't feel uncomfortable when I attempt this problem and I do not line up the decimals. Here we go. So we have 3.14 times 2. 3.14 times 2. This 2, the decimal point is behind the 2. All right? But it's not necessary for this decimal point to be here. So here we go. All we're going to do is multiply normally. 4 times 2 is 8. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 3 is 6. All right? So another thing that is different, another thing that's different when we're multiplying decimals is we're not just bringing the decimal down. We're not just bringing the decimal down. What we're doing is we're counting the number of decimal places in both parts of the problem. We're counting the number of decimal places in both parts of the problem. We're adding those numbers together, and then the sum of the decimal points in both parts of the problem will be the number of places we move the decimal point in our final answer. Let's take a look. So what we have is we have 2 decimal places. We have 2 decimal places in the top. We have 2 decimal places in the top part of our problem. We have no decimal places in the bottom part of our problem. 2 plus 0 is 2. So what that means is we're going to move 2 decimal places in our answer. The final answer is 6.28. Final answer. Final answer. 3.14 times 2. If you're in geometry, if you have let's say a problem where you got pi, which is 3.14, and you have let's say a radius of 1, you have 2 times 1 times pi, 2 pi r. 2 times 1 times pi, you get 2 times pi. If you want to find let's say it's a circumference, formula for circumference, that would be a way you could find circumference without using a calculator. Okay, so we're just trying to show you how this could be relevant to maybe what you have to do maybe in your class. Let's take a look at another problem. So let's say we want to multiply. Let's say we want to multiply 2.25 times 3.14. All right, 2.25 times 3.14. Let's set that up vertically. We have 2.2. I think I'm going to need a little room here. I think I'm going to need a little bit more room here. 2.25 times 3.14. All right, so we have 2.25 times 3.14. All right, so we're not bringing the decimal down, not bringing the decimal point straight down. Don't confuse this with multiplication and division. And it's just coincidental that these decimal places are in the same place. All right, I'm not trying to force that to happen. All right, so let's multiply like we normally would. 5 times 4 is 20. Carry the 2. 4 times 2 is 8. Plus the 2 is 10. Carry the 1. 4 times 2 is 8. Plus 1 is 9. Leave a space here. Leave a space there. And let's, 5 times 1 is 5. 2 times 1 is 2. 1 times 2 is 2. Leave 2 spaces here. And now 3 times 5 is 15. Carry the 1. 3 times 2 is 6. Plus the 1 is 7. And 3 times 2 is 6. Now you add all that up. You get 0, 5. That's 11. Plus 5 is 16. And you get 10. Carry the 1, 7. All right, so you get 70650. And now don't forget, you don't bring the decimal point straight down. That's what you would do if you were adding and subtracting. When multiplying, the way you place the decimal point in your final answer is you count the number of decimal places in the top part of your problem, you count the number of decimal places in the bottom part of your problem, and then you add those up, and then you count that number of decimal places in your final answer. Let's take a look. Make sure you understand what I'm talking about. The number of decimal places in 2.25 is 2 decimal places. The number of decimal places in 3.14, that's 2 decimal places. You add those up to get 4, and that's the total number of places, 1, 2, 3, 4, that you're going to count in your final answer. So final answer, 7.065. 7.065, final answer. Final answer.